Hello and welcome to the Digital Digest, your weekly breakfast of insights, tips and tricks and general information that will help anyone trying to move things forward in this digital world of accounting. This show is brought to you by both the Digital Disruptors and SB Digital, which are pushing the boundaries in this digital accountancy space. I'm your host, Ryan Pearcy, and I am delighted to be joined by Rebecca Williams from eCounting Made Easy and Rebecca's Finance Tutorials on YouTube. And we're going to be discussing how tech development is affected training or trainees in the accounting space. So on that, let's kind of crack into it. So Rebecca, talk a bit about how, I guess, the advent of cloud, how the advent of AI is affecting training and the skills needed for trainees.
So there's lots of different aspects that we can go into here. So I'm going to try and keep it really brief and just compare it to sort of my experience going back all those years. So I think nowadays, everybody wants to have, the latest AI, the latest tech. They want all of the systems talking to one another, which is fantastic. But when you look at that from a trainee's point of view, it's actually quite difficult to get that right, because there's almost got to be an element of being able to show trainees, elements such as double entry and how to use a system and how to actually check that the data in there is correct. And then the other side of it and making sure that they can, data analyze and understand the information in there to a certain degree. But it seems I've had quite a lot of conversations over the last sort of 12 months or so with employers who've taken on trainees. And it's fantastic that trainees nowadays have embraced technology and they're ready and raring to go and they want to use technology and they want to be part of a firm that is very tech forward and forward thinking. But the problem is this sort of core training that we had back in the day, that sort of bottom layer of the pyramid, if you will, is almost being erased to some degree with the use of software. So it's trying to find that balance between the two to make sure that they're getting the basic training and also being trained on how to use a system and how that sort of works and flows throughout the whole of the app stack. So it's difficult for employers at the moment, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary. That software has helped us as a profession because it accelerated how quickly we can do anything. But with that, it has then accelerated, or as you say, possibly even skipped out a lot of that development pathway for people that come into the profession. I remember, at the start having to tick bank recs for ages, and it kind of really forced you into that attention to detail. And maybe that entire skill just gets missed now.
It definitely does. And I remember, I remember being in one of these big firms in Liverpool and being told, the bank rec is your job today. And it would take sometimes, a week, depending on the size of the job.
Yep.
And you would get the green pen and you'd tick box, exercise every single element of that. And I remember that one time in a particular job when I was working on a doctor's practice, it wouldn't reconcile because there was a page missing from the bank statement, or in another instance, it was because there was a check that hadn't been accounted for after the year end had been ripped out of the checkbook. But, some people might argue, well, that's not the best use of a trainee's time. They could be doing X, Y, and Z and learning maybe at a more accelerated pace. But the problem is now, if you get a bank rec, let's use Xero for an example, you can click on the bank reconciliation report and it brings off to say, these items are outstanding, you've got your lodgements, etc. But if you're a trainee who's just coming into the industry now, firstly, are you going to just put all of your reliance on that report as a default, which I would say most do?
Yeah.
And at what point, where is the control? Where is the check that information is actually correct? And are employers, asking clients for that bank statement at month end and asking their staff, okay, right, these are the checks that you've got to do. Obviously, we don't have checks that often anymore, so maybe that part's irrelevant of the bank rec check. But the process itself, I think sometimes we've got to be really careful that we don't get into a space where we're overly reliant on the software that we're using and not, again, teaching that fundamental control reconciliation process to our staff. I think it's very easy to get into this area over here. That's just one example.
No, I think that's perfect. And the bit that I think is important here is that we can rely on tech and we can accelerate our development. Is it lot of value of going through and manually reconciling bank statement, or typing up invoices into an Excel workbook. No, if we can get tech to replace it, that's great. But it's when that doesn't work, understanding how to repair that's the bit that we need to ensure isn't skipped, or at least there is a skill set within the firm, within the practice, that can do that. Because I guess going back a while, that was generating value, ticking all the work. Now you can throw it into tech that's not generating value, but there will be points where actually we need to do it. And I think AI is going to accelerate this even more. It's going to make it more reliable. It's going to remove a lot more of that kind of manual checking, which actually brought the core experience skill set into those trainees. So that whole rehashing, rejigging, completely restructuring how you train your team is going to change dramatically over the next 5 years.
Yeah, but I really feel for employers, and I know myself at some point I'm going to take on staff, and to me it's a massive leap, because I'm always conscious about the fact that there's other areas of training you've got to be aware of, and I want to make sure I give the right time to the staff. But I think from an employer's point of view, if let's just say that you've been trained in a typical firm, and you've trained in a certain way, so you trained with processes and documents on Word, let's just say, for example, that element of training and the way that you were trained through your career is going to be so different to the way that really we need to start training individuals. It's a complete shift. And I think with all the stresses and deadlines that employers have already, trying to make that shift but do it in the right sort of steps is going to be very, very difficult. I mean, I would say nowadays we're very, very similar to other industries in terms of how we need to be training staff, which was never the way previously. So as you say, there's a lot of synergies between different industries that I'm starting to see, which is fantastic. But I don't think as a profession that we've really nailed that yet. I think we're still at a very early adoption of AI and software tools. And yeah, I just think we need to put a lot of thought into how we're going to train staff.
Yeah, and the importance of it. And I think let's come back to that in a second, because I think another angle we really need to consider is, what are the expectations of staff coming into an accounting profession now? Because there's so much that they can do at their fingertips on apps. As they're coming through and they come into an accountancy firm, they're really not going to like just being shown archaic software, working kind of, I guess, in Excel and even worse, maybe on paper in some instances. So are you experiencing any of or have an awareness of any of the expectations that trainees kind of have as they want to come into the profession now?
Yes, and this is the other element. So, there's a lot of accountancy firms in particular who don't necessarily offer bookkeeping services. They offer year-end statutory compliance work. Now, in this age, particularly with the likes of like Just Eat and all the other apps, everybody expects everything at the tip of the fingers, as you say. They want everything yesterday. But then clients want everything yesterday nowadays. They're not willing to wait. And if they have to wait, then they move on. And it's as simple as that. We've got to catch up. So in one way, it's really good that these staff are coming in and they want to be using systems where you've got the data there, everything's up to date, and they're on board in that way. So the likes of bookkeeping jobs, etc., they're very eager and keen to learn, and they're invested in the company in that way. But on the other end of it, again, they do very much want to be working for a firm who has all of that worked out.
Yeah.
The thing is, I sit down sometimes and think, well, I've got my app stack sorted out, things are talking to one another, great. But AI is just constantly changing, and there's so many options out there that you could look at that could make a vast difference to how you're running your business, and again, how everything's talking to one another, that it's sometimes difficult to sort of get the right processes in place, and it takes a long time to document all of those processes. So it's a difficult one, because I think the trainees do want to come in and move, get with a fast moving firm, and who wouldn't at that age? You want to be part of a firm that's growing, that is innovative, that the culture's great, as opposed to maybe a firm who's 10 years behind, who's just playing catch up all the time, who's not who's got that reactive attitude as opposed to taking action. And it's not exciting,
No.
being part of that culture. You want to be part of a culture where everybody's thinking forward and what can we do next and how do we use this that more effectively. And I was at the Zero Awards just the other day, and there was a category for firms who are using technology already available to them, but using that in a very forward-thinking way that some of the things I'd never even heard of, I had my mind blown. So again, that's part of my to-do list, to look into all of that. But you want these younger staff, not necessarily younger staff, I guess, but the staff coming in who want to be part of that and who can bring different ideas into the firm to help you look at things a different way or, take advantage of that. That's what they want. But unfortunately, there are not actually that many accountancy firms and bookkeeping firms who are at that level yet. But I understand why that is. We're trying. But yeah, that's what they want, essentially.
Yeah, they're coming in with expectations, as you say, of data at their fingertips, the ability to come in, use modern technology, and people really knowing what they're doing and talking about.
Yeah.
Accounting firm owners are trying to balance that with making sure the core principles are in place while trying to adapt to a fast-moving market in normally a business model that does not allow for fast change. So the traditional partnership business model is not something that allows for lots of investment, innovation. Is something that's about steadying the ship and going on a constant journey. So everything is kind of like bashing against each other. But what's critical in any of this is that because the tech's there, it's accelerating. Getting the training right for those that are coming into the business on technology is critical. You have to get that from day one, make sure they understand it. And then they'll probably steer in what we should be looking at and what we should be considering. So how, I guess, do you envisage firms should be helping their new starters, their trainees, even their current staff, learn about the technology that's out there? Have you seen models or approaches that work more effectively than others?
Yeah, so I would say with any type of change, whether it's an accountancy firm, bookkeeping firm, or even in a completely different industry, I think you need to have a top-down approach of this is the way that we're going to be doing things, get everybody involved. Because if you have that, I'm sure we've all witnessed it, but if you've got that one staff member in a group or in the team who's like, don't want to do that, I just want to do my job, I'm not interested, it eventually brings the entire team down. It's like that bad apple almost. So I think getting everybody involved, and there's different ways you can do that, can help with the overall training process anyway. So we used to make individuals in the team almost responsible for a certain area of software. So you might have somebody who's, a Xero expert, somebody who's a QuickBooks expert, somebody who's a Zapier expert, and so on and so on. But that gives people a sense of responsibility, which I think everybody wants in the workplace. They want to feel like they're contributing, the go-to person sort of thing. And we used to make those responsible for documenting processes. So whenever a trainee would come in, they would be almost shadowing that person for a week, 2 weeks, making their own notes at the same time, but then also reviewing what has been done. And making changes. So now you can use Loom, Scribe, which were never around again back in my day. I'm a dinosaur at this point. But you can look at that and say, okay, well, your job as a trainee who's brand new, doesn't understand bookkeeping, all the rest of it, the core fundamentals, is to review this document, completely going in blind and just saying, okay, does this make sense? And if it doesn't make sense, then we need to do something from our side because we're missing a step and presuming knowledge. So that is how I would get everybody involved. And it's also, I think for trainees, one of the main reasons why they leave firms in the first 3 to 6 months is because they get in on day one and they have no clue what they're doing. They don't know why they're there, what they're there for. They don't really understand what bookkeeping and accounting is, per se. They might have read a few textbooks and gone to uni, but they've not actually experienced what it's like. Maybe not even in a corporate environment at that point. So getting them involved from day one makes them feel like they're part of the team, as opposed to having these mixed feelings of, what am I doing and all the rest of it. So it almost sets a process, and it means, again, that you've got from a manager point of view, etc., you know that everybody's been through a certain amount of training on software in a certain way, shadowed the best people, everything's documented. So it sort of solves other problems, down the road too. Getting people to have the Xero certification, going through that, the QuickBooks certification, and I'm sure other softwares will bring out more later down the line. But that sort of approach, I think, is the best, just to get everybody on board and eliminate any, I can't think what the word is now, but I call it, where you've got uncertainty, to me, always leads to anxiety. Always.
Yeah, definitely.
It's
Getting that blend between bottom up and top down is critical. And as you say, bottom up is, I guess, getting your ideas, empowering, getting people involved. And then top down is that mandation of, okay, well, now we know what we're going to do. Now, you as the team have spoken, we now mandate that to eliminate those outliers, the ones that cause the friction, cause the problems, and inevitably kind of derail the plans over time. So, and I think part of that with, I guess, the bottom up approach is that you can get these specialisms. So you said, you've got your Xero, QuickBooks expert, Zapier expert, if that's needed. You've got those that maybe train more effectively because that's where their skill set is. And we're now experiencing those that do that, creating their own little role that's very digital focused. So they may just be supporting the firm, as a kind of software support side, especially on larger firms. They may be doing digital transformation with clients or systems advisory. And you've got all these potential other offerings that actually can generate more revenue, spreads the skill set of the firm, making it more, I guess, diversified. But a key problem with this is that then by doing that, you are very reliant on that individual. If that person goes, I've
got a counter to that. So yes, so understandably, employers are concerned about that you've got the one member of staff who knows everything, and if they go, you've lost A, all of that knowledge base, and B, it gives that employee a lot of power, because they know things that other people don't know, etc. They're the go-to person. So what we did back when I worked in a telecoms company was we created a buddy system. So initially starting off with individuals who are core in certain areas, but then the buddy system works in that the QuickBooks expert will talk to somebody over here, the Xero one will talk to this over here, Free Agent, whatever software you're using, so that there's at least two people who firstly can do every job in the firm, and also that at any one time, if one person's on holiday and all the rest of it, or again they leave, then you've got somebody else there who knows the processes, who understands what they're doing, etc. And what you do with that is every time that there's a shift, as the team gets bigger, you then create, the buddy system becomes three people who can do the same job with the same information. So that information is never lost. It's kept within the firm, and you don't have that issue or that worry of, oh, well, if such a body goes, then because you should always also be training staff and bringing them up to that sort of next level. So it's all part and parcel. So that really helped us when we implemented that, and I'd highly recommend anybody do that in their own firms.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that can bring us very quickly into our last point, which is how, I guess, being digitally focused can really help with both recruitment and retention if you get it correctly. So recruitment, in the fact that if you are more digital, you look a little bit more sexy, I guess, than other accountancy firms. More interesting, at least. So if you're going out and saying, this is what we do, this is our focus, these are the areas, then more, I guess, younger people possibly, but those that have grown up around tech look at you and go, oh, I want to be part of that, I want to be involved in that, rather than something that's a bit more stable. So it really helps in the recruitment side. And then I guess similarly, it should help with retention as well. And do you see anything on the retention side, Rebecca, that I guess being digital helps with?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, I don't think anybody gets into this industry to do A, firstly, the same job every day, and B, to sit there manually keying in information into Excel or another software. That's not why we did this. We did this to be close to clients and to have that commercial acumen and be able to advise and assist. And really get involved, get a hands-on approach. So I think the use of all of this tech is going to speed up that process for trainees and staff across the board, which is really exciting. But I've found that those firms that I've spoken to and been a part of, who have embraced technology and got staff, again, involved at every level, have got, their retention rates are 90% plus. And we're not talking, 3 or 4 person firms. We're talking 40, 50, 60, 70 people firms. So that's incredible. But it just shows, I think, in my experience anyway, it's very rare that I come across somebody who doesn't want to be part of a nurturing, growing culture, and not necessarily fast-paced culture, but one where you're embracing the technology so that you can spend less time on the manual processes and more time looking at data and looking at opportunities and risks, etc., with clients. That seems to be the way in my experience.
Definitely. Yeah, people come into this profession to help people to some extent, right? Stability and helping people. And I guess the stability part is still going to be there, even though there's a lot of disruption with technology nowadays. But we've seen those, we've got some firms in this business that have huge pipelines of recruitment. They've got, like 3 years worth of people queuing up to join. And as you say, 90%, retention rates are huge. But look, I think we've identified that going through this tech journey is challenging. Training is a massive challenge for any firm to get correct. But if you do get it correct, it can be a really positive impact for your firm. You can have new service lines, you can improve your recruitment, improve your retention. And I think, look, this is a great place to kind of wrap up this week's show. So anyone that has been listening, hopefully Rebecca and I provided you with valuable insights that you can take forward. Please do check out the show notes for links to the Digital Disruptors, SB Digital, and anything and anyone that we've discussed or referenced throughout this show. If you want to catch future episodes, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel and Rebecca's YouTube channel. And please do make sure you look out for the release every Thursday morning. Look forward to speaking to you next week.